Good day, everyone. Welcome to our first class, where Roy will teach us how to make the perfect resume. We did run into a few technical difficulties, so the recording is missing about the first minute of class. I hope you all enjoy and learn something new. Thank you.
Let me look through the two or three different resumes I may have, um, so that we can choose the best one and move forward with applying for the job. Up to 90% of employers, including most Fortune 500 companies, use applicant tracking systems to manage candidate applicants, right? So systems that are reading resumes, right? There are some places where people still read resumes by hand, but a lot of these companies, time is of the essence, right? And so they're going to essentially weed out some applicants based, and we're going to go over this, but it's based on how closely does the information in the job opening, the job listing, do we have information that mirrors that, right? So if we have information that mirrors that, the more information we have that mirrors that, the higher likelihood that you're going to get moved on from, the weeding out process, I guess you could call it. The average time a hiring manager spends looking at a resume is 7 seconds. So your resume needs to make a very quick impression, right? And I think a lot of this is just when we think about 7 seconds, like, can we actually look at a resume and say, oh, this is great. I know everything about this person. They're going to be the perfect fit. What's obviously likely happening is that person is making decisions about how can I exclude this person, right? Like what is a resume telling me that this person may not be the right fit? So instances where basically the in a lot of cases the information that's on the resume is not matching or not a good match for what they're looking for from an employment standpoint. The average resume only lists about half of the keywords used in the job description. So compare to the job ad and update, right? So this is a situation where you will have probably a few different resumes if you have a couple of different things that you're interested in. Maybe if you were trying to get something that's a little bit more technical, let's say, and so you may have one that's more technical focused versus one like if you were in customer service and you have one that's more customer oriented, right? So then you have two quick resumes, you're tweaking them so that, again, what you have on your resume matches what's in the job listing. And then the best format is a PDF file since it allows your resume to be readable by most ATS software and keeps your resume layout from changing, right? So again, um, you always want to keep a copy that's going to be in Word or in something that can be easily editable, but then converting that to PDF when you send it over. So that way you're sure that, hey, I didn't actually, maybe you went into that document and you said, okay, let me make a couple of quick edits real quick so that I can send this over. You don't accidentally delete things or anything like that. So always good to have your resume in multiple different file types. I'm going to pause there and just see if there's any questions or concerns about any of this. Is any of this surprising?
As far as the PDF format, I mean, last time I had to hand somebody a resume, it was actually paper, but should we like this? Do we need like Adobe programs, or does any kind of document type, like, do we have to find a program that'll print to PDF or something like that?
That's a great question. I think most of the stuff that we use, like Microsoft Word, those types of things, you can choose PDF as an output option, right? So like you don't actually have to have it; it's just going to automatically convert it. Same thing if you use Pages on Apple, it'll do the exact same thing. So it's a good call out, but definitely good to have. I when I have I have one resume I use and I edit that, and I will save both a Word doc and a PDF, and one of them will be like literally will be like, what's the company I'm applying for? I'm going to save it with that, some key phrases that I know. Okay, this is my PDF and this is my Word doc. Um, Moving on, some more interesting statistics. For nearly 70% of recruiters, the most important section of your resume is your past work experience, right? So we'll get into some of the key phrases and words that we want to use, how we want to craft that section so that it reflects very well on the experience that we've had. Research shows that 54% of candidates don't tailor their resume to the job description, which can considerably lower their odds of getting called in for an interview. So this is something I'm continuing to kind of like reinforce here. Um, you have to change it, right? You can't just have one and you send it out for everyone. In most cases, like you should have an objective, and that objective should say to obtain a role as whatever your role is, right? If the role is a team leader with Chase, then you're going to say to obtain a role as a team leader with Chase, right? So we're going to update it based on the specific role that we're looking for. And we, again, whether it's a person looking at it or a machine, it's going to be all about how well do those requirements or what the employer is looking for match up with your job experience. This is really interesting to me. Applications that get sent before 10 a.m. have an almost 90% higher chance of getting notice, while ones sent within the first week of the job vacancy being posted have a further 60% chance of making it in front of a recruiter. So here at Chase, we see this a lot. Something will come up. It's a very popular role. There's only so many positions, or maybe it's literally the only position, and there's a lot of interest. And day one, they can have like 100, 150 people that have already applied. Well, they're not going to interview 100 or 150, right? So like they're typically, if they get that type of response, they're going to close out that opening, right? They're going to close it out. They're going to go through the people that have applied, and then they're going to find out, okay, these are the 10 people or whatever that we want to apply to move on to the next round, right? But I do think this speaks to the preparation piece, making sure we have a workable resume so that we're able to get it out quickly, get it out fast. Show that that interest is there, and then that way you don't miss out on something that really interests you. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or concerns about any of that. All right, so this is a format, took it from Indeed there. Indeed's been very good to me, so I like a lot of their resources. But this is generally how the resume looks, right? Your name and contact information, summary or objective. For me, the objective, again, is really helpful in terms of looking to, interested in obtaining a role as XYZ, whatever it is. Your professional history, which is the bulk of this, right? You're looking to have about 10 years of work experience. If you have that, if you have less than that, then you will have more room to kind of expand on your current role or maybe the different roles you've had. Education, skills, and then there's kind of awards, achievements, hobbies, and interests section, right? I think some of the hobbies and interests, I mean, we obviously everyone knows how important all these sections are, but honestly, like this thing, it really kind of tells the hiring person, like this is a human being, right? Like they have other interests outside of Chase or wherever it is you work currently, HEB, wherever it is. Um, I had a friend of mine, he applied for a job at the Federal Reserve, and like it was very stiff competition. Lots of people who are very qualified. And the thing that they asked him about was at the bottom, it said that he was a certified barbecue judge. And they're like, what does that mean? Can you tell me about that? And he's like, sure, he saw what is that? A Groupon basically, where he bought a Groupon. They had this class. They were certifying people as certified barbecue judges. He completed it, paid it, all that stuff, and then as part of that, because there's all these like food types of festivals and competitions, then he got to attend all these. He even appeared on like one of those food shows. I forget which one, but like basically judging going to different barbecue competitions. And so that was something they were really interested in, right? I mean, they're like, okay, we get it. You have the requisite experience. Like, we're happy with the professional history and the education. Now it's kind of like, okay, let's that kind of opens that conversation, right? It opens a conversation. Now we can talk about something that's a little different, right? So I'll kind of pause there and see if there's any questions or concerns about any of that.
For the professional history, is it more important now to show like the loyalty aspect? Like, like me, I've been with Chase now for 8.5 years, whereas I know some people that stick with a job and they're moving every 2 years to move up to get to step up that pay grade. Is that still, I mean, is loyalty matter more than pay, or how is that looked at?
That's a good question. I think when you're crafting this, I don't think that it's a negative that you may have moved. I think moving somewhere in less than a year, probably, or like every year, might be a little bit of a head turner. A couple years, if you're able to explain, well, this is a better opportunity, or, I took this opportunity because it made better use of my skills, or I was more interested in working for that company, that sort of thing, then being able to speak to that, right? So we will get into the fact that, you know, you do have, there's a couple of things you have to speak to, right? And one of the more important things in your resume is gaps in your resume. Why are there gaps? There may be very good reasons why there are gaps, but that's someone that a hiring man or that's something that a hiring manager is going to look for. What are the gaps? Can we explain the gaps? And then likewise, to kind of to your point, Andrew, you do want to show a history or highlight a history of like additional responsibility, right? So like maybe you've been working at Wendy's or whatever, and you were working at a drive-through window, and like this is where you started, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, now you've moved up to assistant manager. You're in charge of training folks. Those types of skills are very important, right? Those demonstrate leadership, right? Potential management experience, or like a business analyst type thing where it's clear that you can be left in charge of a process or people. And if someone clearly uh, trusts you to do that, right? So we always want to highlight those areas where we have additional responsibilities, whatever those may be. But we'll start at the top, name and contact information. Name you want to be called, right? Make sure it's consistent in all communications. Address format should also be the same as the mailing address. Email address, use your personal, not your work email address. Create a new one if needed for professionalism, right? You don't want to have like, I don't know. You just want to maybe be careful with some of the more informal email addresses, like, I don't know, whatever. Cool guy 23, whatever, like maybe you want to like have something that's a little bit more professionalism. Some of us may have something that might be questionable in terms of like professionalism and so forth. Just it's easy to change it, easy to get a new one. LinkedIn and social media. So like LinkedIn, like lots of employers will use that. LinkedIn can be a really good resource for like different a lot of different companies. They have a lot of different hiring resources, right? They have like newsletters. They have folks that they have like events where they like have like a drop off your resume. You can talk to someone. These are great ways to get contacts, to get additional information about the hiring process. And many times they'll tell you exactly, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what your interview will be like. But with anything social media, we want to be careful, right? You want to be careful that, basically, is this something you would want an employer to see, right? Like that's the thing that we want to be mindful of, because these decisions are made by human beings ultimately, right? Like even though resumes may go through databases or computers that will scan things or even like chat GPT, ultimately those types of things are not making a decision. They're just weeding out like the ones that are not qualified. Then you get to a point where like you have a certain number of resumes and now it's like, all right, let's look at these things, right? So social media, definitely something you want to be mindful of. Um, Particularly, yeah, I mean, I think we all know kind of like how it goes in terms of like, things that can be said out of context or taken out of context or, I'm not going to go into that a lot, but and I'm sure if you kind of search, you'll find things that may be helpful in terms of like, I probably wouldn't put my Snapchat information or whatever the case may be. And then phone number, personal, not work. Make sure you check your voicemail message, right? If you have something that's a little bit more informal, again, probably want to just leave it at the default or like update it with something a little bit more professional. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions or concerns about any of that.
As far as like you said, email address, make sure you don't use your work email. However, if you're applying within the firm, and usually that's how they usually get a hold of you, can you still use their work email, even
Yes,
though
no, that's a great question. No, you're absolutely right. You can use the work email address if you're doing internally. I think this was mainly geared towards a like external type of resume, but I will say I have an internal one as well, and I can share that one too. So I'm going to share both of mine, and then it's kind of like the way I think about it is it's a workable template that you can use and you can change it and alter it however you want. So then that way you're not starting from scratch, or maybe you can like cut and paste with stuff you already have. So then you're kind of a little bit further in the process. But yeah, I prefer my internal one actually because it like speaks to like all you, as you know, like there's lots of different work streams and things that we support. And so you're able to kind of like, you know, okay, this is a project that I worked on, right? And it's going to give a lot more information. So that's a great question. But yeah, for work, that's for internal, that's fine. I'm just speaking mostly for like external.
all right, thank you.
Of course, great question. Um, oops, objective. Again, this goes back to seeking a position as. We're just straight up, this is the role I'm looking for, right? And putting that at the top, it's an updated based on role. This is really important, right? Sometimes we're in that hurry. Oh man, this job, this is perfect. Benefits perfect. I love this company. I'm going to apply right now. And then we have it updated our resume, and it's like, hey, looking for a role with Citicorp or whatever, and it's or looking for an adjuster role with Allstate, and we're applying for State Farm or something, right? It's just that's gonna be an easy, all right, thank you, but no thanks. I mean, unless your um, work history is impeccable, but again, I mean, it's putting yourself at a disadvantage simply because of the sheer numbers of people that apply, right? Um, Professional history, company name, dates of tenure, description, role, and achievements. Again, prioritize instances of greater responsibility. When you've been given greater responsibility, make sure you speak to that, right? It's not about whether, okay, well, I was only doing this and I was helping out, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. It is a big deal because someone trusted you to do that, right? And so we want to make sure that we highlight that we speak to those things. Those are super important. And again, we talked about this, be prepared to speak to gaps in work history. And we'll go through a little bit of things that you can do to do that as well. Words to avoid, we all know like if you work for a bigger company, a lot of that business lingo, like value add, buy-in, core competency. It's a lot of like gobbledygook that doesn't mean anything, general phrases of self-promotion, go-getter, strategic thinker. Rather, let's put in the roles. Let's make sure that the different projects that we've owned, the different things that we've been able to move forward, that we speak to those. And then the other thing, you get into givens, right? Um, Hard worker, self-motivated team player. Like these are just like any company is going to expect that you're offering those things. Um, so let me go on to the next one. Utilize action phrases that mirror job posting. Again, can't stress this enough, right? If 70% of what they're looking at is the actual work history, we want to make sure that we utilize those action phrases. Temp, trained, mentored. Big one, manage, develop, achieve, coordinated. Like, all of these things show ownership. You want to paint yourself as a like high performer, not a steady Eddie, right? Someone who's gradually taken on more responsibility, has produced better results over time, and so forth, as opposed to like someone, hey, I'm here, right? But rather, I've been given more responsibility and I've been able to achieve really great results with that responsibility. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or concerns about that.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick. We are gonna get cut off here in about 7 minutes, guys. When we do, if you will, and I know I'm asking a lot today, go ahead and click back on that link that I sent y'all in the email. We'll log right back in and continue back in where we left off. Since this is the free version of Zoom, we're limited on our time, so we'll jump right back in as soon as we get everybody back on.
Do you want to keep going or you want to stop here?
Oh, we can, yeah, if we want to take a 2 minute breather, I'll shut the meeting down and reopen it back up. Sound good to everybody?
Yeah, can I ask a question before we make that split?
Please do.
Okay, so I think some of us have mentioned. I forgot to mention in my quick little bio, 11-year Army vet. But I guess in my resume, I haven't come across this issue yet with the two positions I've had in Chase. But when in the hiring process, I do have a gap in my resume when I've applied to those positions, basically because from the time I left, I ETS to joining Chase, I had a contractor position that I don't believe provided much value to the positions that I was applying to. So it would show that I have a gap. Again, mentioned that it didn't present a problem, but that would be a gap in my resume. Is there any suggestions to or any tips to, I guess, because I might not be the only person that is applying with these kind of gaps because, leaving service to applying to, these kind of jobs. Would there be any suggestions when speaking to those gaps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's not that the gap itself is an issue, right? And if you're saying, okay, like I've applied in the past and it hasn't presented a challenge or an issue, then you're good, right? So I think there are just some times when there can be a significant gap and the interviewer will want to know a little bit more, right? There's going to be all kinds of things that people go through, right? Like, caring for a sick parent or something like that. You may be a full-time, like in that instances, you may actually be like a full-time caregiver, right? So, I mean, that's like having a job basically as full-time caregiver, right? I left the workforce so I could care for my sick parent or whatever. So then you'd want to make sure that you document that as like a job. I was basically a full-time caregiver. These were my responsibilities, right? Because that's something that you had to do basically. So yeah, there's definitely ways to do it. And I think it's maybe like looking at the role and I think it's just a matter of maybe trying to find what were the positive things because I think there's always something we can take away, even things I've hated to do. Like I've learned a lot, and like going back to the pizza thing, I probably learned a lot more about like pizza and how to make pizza from scratch from like the mistakes I've made versus like the ones that have gone great. So I think there's always something that you can add. Is just being ready to speak to that if they ask for that.
And Roy, would it be better to leave it blank and explain it if asked, or would it be better to put it in and be vague?
Um, so I think it depends, right? So, because there's some strategies that say, okay, let's say you finished a job, right? Like, let's say I was working at Bill Miller's or whatever, and I finished in February. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to take some time for myself and I'm going to go back in like, I don't know, June, right? So there's that gap, right? So one strategy will say, well, just don't put the months, right? Just put the year. So then you started another job same year as the one you left. So then your like the gap doesn't appear to exist, right? Because we're not putting the months there. So then it's not something we have to explain. So like a shorter gap, that's probably going to be a great strategy for so that they don't look too closely at that. Or but I think it's more for like the longer gaps, right? Being able to explain that. And I think the challenge is more if you have less than 10 years of work history. If you have less than 10 years of work history, then you have limited work experience. They're that's probably going to be more important to explain the gap than if you actually have the 10 years of work experience. I think it's just a matter of, it sounds like in Jonathan's case, like they just didn't ask too much about it. And so it wasn't a thing. But I do know some interviewers are trained to identify that because it can be a potential red flag, right? Just as like switching jobs, let's say every year, can potentially be a red flag. It's like, can we speak to that? Again, better experience for me, better opportunity, you know, that sort of thing versus, you know, I'm just going to stay just because, right? I think that's just not the way things are anymore, where you just stay with a company indefinitely because like we're loyal to that company. We have to all um, market ourselves in the best possible way and look for the best possible opportunity. Hopefully, I answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
So just going back to, oh wait, I'm not. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Okay, sorry. So just going back to this area, obviously, if we're still working, still employed, want to make sure there are action phrases, present tense, right? Previous jobs, past tense. So just and of course that's a big piece, right? And just like professional communication, making sure tenses match. Otherwise, it just reads very clunky, very disorganized. So that's one of those proof reading things we want to take care of. This is a good one. As you think about like your work history, think about times when you were in charge of a process or you worked in a process and you saved that company time and money, right? Because a big piece of what employers look for is what is this person thinking about the work that they do and thinking about ways to do the work more efficiently for less money, right? Every company or almost every company has shareholders that that they're responsible or respond to. So they always want to make sure that that individual hires they're going to respond more highly, right, to people who have measurable, proven value. So times when you exceeded your goals, and what did that mean, right? So if you exceeded that goal, you're saving the company money. Like in our world, handle time's a big one, right? It's all about saving the firm money. So consistently hitting that goal speaks to a commitment to doing that, right? So, and if you're able in your work history to identify ways that you've saved the company time and money and you can quantify that, ideally, that would be the best thing to have in your work history. Basic clean fonts. It should be easy to read, right? Not a time for the wingdings, probably. Just keep it Arial and Times New Roman or the Legend of Zelda, font type, anything like that. Tolkien, what is it? Elvish or anything? Nothing like that. Um, Updated to remove jobs from more. Excuse me, I like to make corrections as I go. From more than 10 years ago and minor achievements, right? So things that may not be as valuable anymore, like college achievements, school achievements, if we're now a fair amount of time outside of that. Proofread, don't leave it to spell check, right? You can spell things correctly, but it doesn't fit. And of course, save multiple versions of your resume. Always, always, always read it tons of times. Make sure everything makes sense. Give it to someone to read it. Give it to myself. Give it to Drew. Whoever. Have someone read it. I just voluntold Drew. But have someone read it so that you can put the best foot forward, right? And we all know you work on something. It's like this looks great, but someone can come in and say, you know what, this is good, but I would try this. This may be a better approach. Same thing, skills. These are skills that firms are looking for. Obviously, most firms, critical thinking, problem solving, great oral and written communication, leadership, time management. Typically when people get to interviews, they want to speak to like a lack of time management skills. Probably not the best thing to do because most places you're under deadlines. There's an expectation that you're going to manage those deadlines effectively. But it certainly, if something was initially a opportunity, then presumably we've worked at that opportunity to fix it, right? So then if time management was in fact an opportunity that you had, then when you get to the interview, you should be prepared to speak to, these are the things I did to improve my time management, and now it's a strength for me, right? Now I'm able to manage my time much better. Marketing's a good one. Always, in our world, there's actually like an internal tool that we have that allows us to put our resume electronically, so anybody can look at my profile and they can see the different roles I've had. That's something that's really important to update as well, because there's lots of different skills that recruiters will look for. And for some of the internal stuff, they will just simply go to that. And if they find someone that has what they need, then they're just going to say, hey, I want to interview these two people. We had something like that recently that happened where they were looking for someone to do site communications. They were looking for someone with a marketing degree. And so they found two folks they searched everyone's electronic directory information, found two folks that had marketing um, experience or degrees rather. And they were like, put together a mock presentation. The best one wins, right? So again, want to make sure that you have those skills as well. Computer literate, if you have other thing, Excel's a good one, right? I think mainly the big thing with this is like, don't embellish too much, right? So like I would say the work history is very much about highlighting the the things where you've been given more responsibility. While the day-to-day piece, may be somewhat of a challenge, we're speaking to more responsibility, ways that we've moved up, ways that we've saved the company time or money, or whatever the case. So that's understood where we may get a little creative, but here probably not so much, right? You don't want to tell people that you are conversational Spanish if you don't speak Spanish, right? As someone who does not speak Spanish, I'm not going to put that on there, right? So, but definitely want to make sure that those skills, language skills are great, but you want to make sure that you are not going too far, right? And then it's like, oh, great, you speak Spanish. We're going to have you translate for all these customers or whatever, and you might find yourself in a pickle. So I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions or concerns about that. All right. So this is where we were talking about the employment gaps. So just these are all some different strategies. Spend your time unemployed preparing to work, right? So if you were not employed, maybe there were things you were doing to prepare yourself for employment. Uh, Determine which jobs you need to include. So maybe that one's at the end of your work history and you have the 10 years already and you don't need to, explain any of that from so long ago. I wouldn't do that. Try to disguise small gaps by omitting the month. We talked about that. Job ends in February. You are going to take a little vacation and see the world and like come back in August ready to work, then just put the same year. That's a way to move forward with that. Use a resume style or format that makes the gap less obvious. There are some formats that have work history, have all the things we're talking about, but then on the right, it's formatted so that you can actually make some additional bullet points to add context to specific things. Uh, List the reason for longer employment gaps as its own job. We talked about that, like a caregiver situation. That would be functionally the job that you would add there, and include experience gained during the gap when relevant. Maybe you took time for personal development. You tried to start a small business. Again, these sorts of things would be helpful. And interviewers I should probably say may ask about this, so be prepared. And you may have an interviewer who maybe they're a veteran as well, and they understand, okay, well, there's different projects and so forth that people take. That's fine, but some experienced interviewers are trained to like highlight specific gaps, and as long as someone can speak to them, it should be fine. This is something that's helpful for me. I do not have a degree. I did attend school for a long time, but I don't have a finished degree, right? So there's different ways that you can add that. You can pick one that works best for you. I think mine just says attended, but that information you can put on there. I mean, it is time that you spent learning some skills, right? Or some knowledge. And I just saw this report recently where like 50% of employers are looking to remove degree requirements moving forward. So, that experience is really more important at this point. There are other things you can do to boost your resume. If you kind of look at your resume and you're saying, I'd like to kind of fill the gaps a little bit. There are lots of free courses that may be relevant to the job you're seeking an offer for, and you can give yourself an edge, right? So like through Coursera, all these different courses, you can get like Excel experience. You can get maybe data analysis experience, all that stuff. I mean, not everything's free, but there's a lot of free stuff that's available that you could kind of help yourself with. Business relationship groups are really important. A lot of these, they pretty much go from one company to the next. And again, some firms do have hiring newsletters, which is a great way to get valuable information, identify contacts. Call to action. So this is what I would say is a good takeaway. Try to complete a draft within 48 hours, right? I can provide you a couple of different templates that I use. And of course, if you want to use them, great. If you're like, I found something better on the web that fits what I'm looking for, that's fine too. Have a friend proofread. If you'd like to send it to me, I'm more than happy to help proofread and help offer you suggestions. And of course, if you're saying, well, I like that, but I'm going to go in a different direction, that's fine too. And ask for feedback. I think this is super important at every part of the process. So like I've interviewed a ton of people and I can literally count. There's 2 people over the years of all the people that I've interviewed that have asked me for feedback on their interview during the interview, right? So we've done the interview. At the end of the interview, ask if they have any questions. They ask a few questions, which is great. You always want to ask the relevant questions. But then after that, they're like, can you provide me feedback on my resume? Can you provide me feedback on my interview? And, that's an easy way to set yourself apart. Every role here, feedback is just a piece of it, right? And I'm pretty sure in every company as well, it's the same thing. So you always want to be mindful of that because that recruiter, that interviewer may offer you some insight that is even more relevant than some of the stuff you've been doing. And I would be remiss if I didn't include some knowledge here from a very famous thinker. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Michael Scott. Make sure, don't talk down to yourself. Don't say, hey, I'm not a good fit for this position. Work on honing that resume, practicing the skills that are necessary. If it means, practicing your interviewing skills in front of a mirror to get confident, having someone mock interview you, all those things. I'm just a big fan of like trying my best and see what happens, right? Don't just say, hey, this isn't going to happen, because you just don't know, right? The person may have great skill or may have a great work history, but they don't have a great resume, and they're just kind of expecting that work history to shine through as opposed to crafting something that speaks to specific things that employers are looking for. And that is the end. That is all I have. So I will pause there and see if there's any questions or concerns about any of this. Okay. As someone who believes in feedback, I will say if you have any feedback from me, I'd love to hear it. You can provide it to Andrew. You don't have to, if you want to keep it anonymous, that's helpful. That's fine as well. But I'd also ask if there's anything that you would be helpful to you in terms of maybe some additional topics that we're missing from here that you'd like to see the gap filled with. Please let myself know or Andrew, and I'd be happy to make sure those are incorporated in the future if needed.
Excellent. I really appreciate you going through all of this with us, Roy. We will be sending out an email to everybody. So what Roy's going to get with me and he's going to give me the examples. He's going to go ahead and give us the copy of the deck that he used. And so I'll get that to each one of y'all. And then if you do have that feedback, feel free to reply back to that email. I'll share it with Roy. If you've got feedback on, how we ran the class today, I take the feedback as well. So include all your thoughts, all that kind of fun stuff on there. We're going to be doing these once a month at least, going forward. Next month we will be doing interview skills, and how to take an interview. So we're going to move forward from what Roy's teaching us, and we're going to go from the paper into a classroom and, into that interview room and start learning those aspects as well next time. So keep us keep us uh keep us on your mind, and we'll be putting that out here before too long, and I'll be sending out an email. Any questions for any of us, guys?
I think, yeah, I something I came up with throughout the presentation. So sometimes, especially in my line of work, where we're short on time because we're constantly so busy with everything we have going on. It's a little tough to apply sometimes. Like I've heard of that, applying before 10 o'clock. I've heard that before, and then I'll try, and then I'll still, I'm busy at work, and then time goes by, and it's so tough. Would you guys have any kind of strategy or maybe layout to how to I have a master, kind of like a master resume, especially for the ones here at Chase. So I do want to tailor it specifically to those positions, but other than I guess what I'm asking is, like, would you guys have maybe like a little format to quickly uh have something where if it's, let's say it's an analyst role, and then another position is a instructor role. Does it kind of make sense what I'm asking? Like, do you guys have any kind of a method to where you can easily switch in and out? Because am I making sense? I'm sorry.
No, you're asking a great question, and I think the answer is, it's a little bit of work, right? So like
Yeah.
you'd want to have the analyst one, and then you'd want to have, maybe you have one let's say that's more management geared, for instance. Then I would have two different ones, right? And I know it's a lot of work, basically. It's going to be a lot of work on the front end, but the benefit of that is, like, you will find things that certain people are always looking for. So for like management, for instance, have you trained people? Have you hired people? How many folks have you directly managed? How many folks have you indirectly managed, right? Have you done compensation? These sorts of things, right? So when you go, as you go through some of these roles, you're going to find that sort of common thread where you can just basically, like, okay, I know they're looking for this thing. Like, how many people have I managed? So that may be the first one, and the type of work that I was doing, for instance. And then the second two are like things that complement that. So, like, generally speaking, it's just 3 bullet points. I mean, it could be more if you had a role that was very involved and you were doing a lot of different things, but you're gonna find that there's like common threads, right? So analyst is probably gonna be very specific, and then if you were doing like a leadership thing, that would be very specific as well. But I would say, have two different resumes, one for the analyst and one for the leadership piece. And again, yes, it's a lot of work at the beginning, but ultimately I think it'll pay off, because as you get that more refined, then you're just changing like one or two things. And that's kind of where I'm at with mine. Is, again, it's not the perfect resume, right? But it's like serviceable, and it's like, if I see something I'm interested in, it's like, all right, all I know is I have to go ahead and change that objective, because everything else is there in terms of like leading teams, hiring, whatever. So um so I think it's like short-term work for long-term relief, basically. So then you get to a point where, and that's just, it's just kind of, I guess, almost a requirement, right? It's like if a lot of there's other statistics about how long it takes to find a job, and it's like the average number of jobs people like apply to, it's like 50 jobs or like you know, uh so or it's a couple of months of work, right? And that's like putting out it's a numbers game. You're putting out enough resumes and applications that you're hitting that goal. But I think again, it's just going to be short term, more work, but it'll pay off in the end. I think is the best way to look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us on our inaugural flight. Hopefully we'll see you all next month. I'll shoot y'all an
Thank
email as I
you.
get all the information, guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy, for your help.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.